Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. I am so excited you're here because today we're going to look at something that will completely flip the way you think about art, creativity, and the global economy. I mean, think about it. When we picture painting, theater, graphic design, or digital media, we usually just think of them as leisure activities, right? Something we do for fun or just to relax on a weekend. But what if I told you that art and culture are actually massive strategic economic forces, like literal pillars that hold up a nation's economy? It's true. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating case study out of Argentina to uncover how the creative sector is quietly rivaling and even beating traditional heavy industries. So let's just get right into it. Section 1. El poder de la cultura, or the economic weight of the arts. We're going to kick things off with some really revealing data from a fantastic academic study by researchers at the National University of La Plata in Argentina. And let me tell you, this data is going to challenge every preconceived notion you might have about the financial value of the arts. Actually, I want you to genuinely guess for a second. Which industry do you think contributes more to the economy? If we look at a country like Argentina, which sector drives more gross domestic product? The massive, sprawling food production industry, the heavy machinery automotive industry, or culture? Go ahead, lock in your guess. Okay, so according to economic indicators from the year 2000 cited in our source research, the cultural industries, and that encompasses everything from publishing and multimedia to the performing arts, contributed a staggering 2.9% to the national GDP. That is exactly equal to the massive food industry, which also sat at 2.9%. Now, just think about the sheer scale of physical infrastructure, right? The sprawling factories, the endless agricultural supply chains required just to produce a nation's food. The cultural sector matched that economic output. And the automotive industry? Well, that's at way down at just 0.6%. Honestly, the textile industry was even lower at 0.4%. The cultural sector is often called the smokeless industry because it relies heavily on human capital, digital infrastructure, and pure creativity rather than smokestacks and assembly lines. Yet it vastly outperforms traditional heavy industries. It is an absolute heavyweight economic contender, for sure. Section 2. Un cambio de paradigma. A paradigm shift from leisure to strategic production. To truly wrap our heads around this massive economic footprint, we have to look at how our perception of culture has just completely shifted over time. We are right in the middle of a major paradigm shift. For the longest time, traditional economic theories entirely dismissed the arts. The old worldview treated art purely as leisure. Economists literally believed that investments in the arts couldn't contribute to the wealth of a nation because, well, culture was seen as just a financial expense that required state subsidies, patronage, and constant bailouts just for entertainment's sake. But the new worldview, it recognizes culture as a strategic productive factor. With the rise of digital globalization, the expansion of telecom networks, and high-tech multimedia equipment, the cultural sector is now an international wealth generator. It drives global tech sales, pays substantial taxes, balances local budgets, and is a massive engine for job creation. Basically, culture is no longer an expense, it's an incredibly lucrative investment. Now, this awakening didn't happen overnight, obviously. Economists slowly, and I mean very slowly, woke up to the power of culture. It actually started way back in 1910 with an early German publication called Art and Economy. But the real starting gun was fired over half a century later, in 1966, when researchers Baimel and Bowen published their groundbreaking essay on the economic dilemma of the performing arts. However, they were still mostly looking at high culture, like orchestras and traditional theater. Fast forward to the early 2000s, and the entire landscape completely fractures in the best way possible. Digitalization, the internet, and multimedia just completely changed the game, triggering an absolute explosion in cultural enterprises. Suddenly, independent game developers, self-published authors, and digital media studios could reach a global market instantly, without massive overhead. Individual creators with tech know-how could suddenly compete on an international level, absolutely skyrocketing that GDP contribution. Moving on to Section 3, El Problema de la Información, navigating the data deficit. But here is where the story gets kind of complicated. We've established this incredible financial growth, right? But despite this massive economic boom, there is a critical, paralyzing roadblock. We are essentially flying blind. There are major issues currently plaguing cultural economics, specifically in Argentina, though honestly, this phenomenon applies globally. First off, the data is incredibly heterogeneous and scattered. It comes from random trade associations or private chambers, meaning there are no centralized standard metrics. Second, there's a complete lack of exhaustive, reliable research tracking where the money is actually going. And third, there's an extreme geographic concentration of the data we do have. It's mostly centered around the capital, Buenos Aires. And this leaves incredibly vibrant regional hubs like La Plata completely in the dark. So, why does this matter? Well, without reliable information, public policy and smart business planning are nearly impossible. If policymakers can't see the economic value of a local art scene, they're not going to fund it. And if a graphic designer or an indie filmmaker can't access market data, they can't secure bank loans, pitch investors, or really plan a sustainable business. Section 4. El rol de la universidad. UNLP's academic intervention. To fix this massive data void, researchers Federico Ernesto Lagunas and Federico Del Giorgio Solfa at the National University of La Plata stepped up and initiated a really groundbreaking project. Through the university's Faculty of Fine Arts, they decided to intervene and actually map out how artistic and design disciplines impact the development of these cultural industries locally. They're taking on the incredibly hard work of professionalizing the sector so the rest of us can actually understand and leverage it. Their underlying motivation is perfectly captured in their core argument. They say, there is a lack of research that allows ordering and systematizing the knowledge necessary to train professionals. And honestly, this is the real tragedy of the data deficit. Without organized data, we just cannot properly educate the next generation of creative entrepreneurs. Imagine a brilliant fine arts graduate, right? They have incredible talent, they launch a design studio, but they have zero understanding of market rates, regional IP law, or project management in their specific local economy. The very students graduating from these programs are the primary actors in a multi-billion-dollar industry, yet they're entering the market totally unarmed. They're graduating without the business and economic tools they really need to survive, let alone thrive. So, how are these researchers actually fixing it? Well, they've laid out a rigorous 2-year methodology. Step 1, they dive deep into existing literature and whatever official state and private data exists to identify the types of cultural industries operating today. Step 2, they narrow their focus to practically map their specific region, La Plata and Gran La Plata, bringing much-needed visibility outside of the capital. Now, step 3 is where the real heavy lifting happens, because official state data is so incredibly weak and disjointed, the researchers literally have to hit the pavement. They are conducting direct surveys and interviews with the cultural actors themselves, knocking on the doors of local studios, theaters, and digital agencies to build a reliable database from absolute scratch. And finally, step 4, they systematize all this raw, hard-earned data to create a brand new theoretical framework. And the ultimate goal of all that hard work? It's to bring real-world economic data directly into the classrooms of future artists and designers. The researchers are translating their field findings into actual tangible study materials, like concept maps, reading guides, and practical activities for university courses like marketing and project management. They are actively transforming university curriculums so graduates learn the business side of their art before they ever leave campus. This bridges the gap between raw creative talent and sustainable economic success. And that is incredibly empowering. Sección 5. Construyendo el futuro. A permanent watch on culture. The researchers' ultimate endgame is to establish what they call an Observatorio Permanente de las Industrias Culturales, or a permanent observatory of cultural industries. This isn't just a one-off study that sits on a dusty library shelf. They are building a continuous monitoring body, bringing the university together alongside public and private organizations. Its sole purpose is to keep a constant, steady pulse on this ever-changing economic powerhouse. Like, imagine a thriving local independent game developer scene that suddenly loses its main distribution channel due to a global tech shift. A permanent observatory spots that trend immediately, alerts local policymakers to provide relief, and helps creators pivot using real-time data. It provides long-term stability to an industry that has historically been incredibly volatile. We've seen today that culture is not just a nice-to-have luxury, right? It's a fundamental pillar of economic wealth, easily rivaling traditional heavy industries. We've seen how absolutely vital it is to map this landscape so creators can actually navigate it and build sustainable careers. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider long after this explainer ends. How do your own creative skills fit into this massive global economic puzzle? Whether you are a creator making the art or a consumer interacting with it daily, you are part of an incredibly powerful economic engine. The real question is, how will you use that power? Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.